communities around us, and especially people like you who are congressional candidates and who believe in our philosophies, our ideology, and which we have a lot of mutual respect for many of the ideologies. I've coined a new word called familyism. So there's a socialism, communism, and all kind of isms, but there's something called familyism, which both the Republicans, the Hindus, and as a matter of fact, all the Americans believe in, and the world should believe in, rather than believing in socialism. You know, the family values is something, and our dignity, our mutual respect is something which we all gonna cherish, and which is gonna make the whole humanity a beautiful place to live. You know, with our philosophy, with our dharma, we want to make sure that we can share this with everyone else and make ambassadors like yourself with us in this journey and in this revolution. So today we'll be asking a lot of questions in the, you know, down the line, exactly how we can partner together, how we can work together. But I'm going to request now Adityaji to start, unless he wants me to go ahead and start with the questions right now.
Japraji, we will just wait. We will have other people also joining. So okay. I will have first of all, I'll give the forum to Brian Maryott to speak about himself and his policies and what he wants to do for his constituencies, California 49, and what he wants to achieve for all Americans, and especially with American Hindus also. We were the first ones to openly endorse him. As per our policy, we have endorsed Brian Maryott way before any of the other candidates. And so we want him to take this floor and speak. So Brian, you'll have around 10 minutes to speak about yourself and your priorities and what you want to achieve for California 49. And as a member of US Congress, which you're very sure to defeat Mike Levin. And we are also fully behind you as you go ahead. So Mike Levin, I'm going to make you live so you can unmute your phone and you can be addressing the whole audience.
Thank you, Adi, and thank you, Chairman Japra, and it's a pleasure to meet you, however, digitally or remotely, but I look forward to making your acquaintance in person, and thank you for spending some time with me tonight, and to other guests who join and others who take the time to listen in the coming days. And it's always a pleasure to be on with my friend Adi. So I'm a pretty straightforward conservative, fast bio, 20, almost roughly 30 years in Massachusetts. My wife, Michelle, and I are born and raised there. I had experience in the field of government back there. I came out of financial services to be a chief of staff in a state legislature, then went back into financial services, came west to experience something different with my young wife, and 26 years later, and 3 beautiful children, ages 17, 12, and 5, we are still here in Southern California, and we are enjoying it very much. I went on council after a 25-year career in the private sector as a financial advisor, certified financial planner, and regional executive. I went on council to help my city, which was at the time dealing with sort of growth, no growth, pro-growth politics, and some of the ugliness that comes with that. We had 7 lawsuits, and I told my wife, this I can do now alongside my career. We won. We smashed the field. Nobody knew who I was, and we did wonderfully. And I began to get such a reward from public service, and I began to become deeply concerned about the direction of our state and our country. And I told my wife 6 months before my 55th birthday, I'm going to retire on my birthday from my field, and focus on public service and run for a higher office. That's what we've done. We are the Republican nominee selected to unseat a very hard left freshman Democrat named Mike Levin, who went in the seat after Darrell Issa stepped away a couple of years ago. Mike and I will run off in November, and we'll beat Mike in a close race. We've worked very, very hard. We have an amazing team, a wonderful staff, tremendous volunteers. We have over 50 high school students that have been volunteering for almost a year now, making tens of thousands of phone calls. Now we're out in the field. We have tremendous field representatives, the message of our campaign is educate, 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 because wherever I see hard left, socialist leaning tendencies with young people, or what Republicans always call changing demographics, it tends to be situations where people are just not well educated about the foundational concepts of our country and how those made such magic, making us inarguably the world's greatest success story in human history. Obviously, I want to bring my financial acumen to Congress. I don't think there's all that much that ails us as a nation, but I think we have work to do in healthcare and making it even more world-class, more accessible, and bringing back more competition to lower prices and continue innovation and maintain all of our freedoms and choices as families and individuals, while we maintain the ultimate safety net for those who are more vulnerable and who might otherwise suffer without some sort of government assistance. We're a very benevolent nation, a wealthy nation. We certainly don't want anybody falling through the cracks where it comes to healthcare, nor do we want individuals who work harder to have a higher level policy or more options when they're sick to be denied that freedom as well. We have work to do in tax and economic policy. Much of our business tax relief, some of the most critical components are not permanent. None of the personal tax rate reductions and all the wonderful things that have helped families save more, plan more, and be entrepreneurial and be able to save for school and have more opportunity that way are permanent at all in the legislation that was passed with Republican leadership in 2017. We have work to do there, and we have further work to do from the mind's eye of a longtime financial planner who worked with families and business owners to expand their families, their enterprises, and fought government along the way instead of being assisted by a more workable roadmap facilitated by government, who then largely stays out of the way. So there's work to be done there, and we need some thoughtful, collaborative immigration reform. We need to bring the temperature down on the issue, get politics out of the way. We need to be fair to our country in terms of the people who are working and producing. We need to ask more of people who are coming here. And we need, I believe, to take the limits off people who have shown more determination to get here and bring a higher skill set and bring more critical needs to our country, as well as those industry areas where people are willing to do work that, so they say, perhaps Americans are not willing to do. And all of that is unfortunately being handcuffed by terrible politics and games playing. I think, sadly, in the Democrat Party, for the most part, the last 3 years, at an extraordinary level of just being disingenuous, but both parties have a little soul searching to do. My overarching theme of the campaign is, say, enough already, let's get back to work, let's collaborate, let's stop the spitballing and nastiness. But it's hard with this president. Much like Prime Minister Modi, the situation with Trump is part of the nation has reacted to him a certain way. And they have gone from resistance to almost a hatred like that has poisoned their otherwise thoughtfulness regarding Trump. And so I think both Modi and Trump have tapped into something where people have sensed some widespread dissatisfaction, and we have to recognize that and respect that for what that is. And these two leaders have been great for their countries for different reasons, and then for some of the same reasons. It doesn't surprise me. And I've talked with Adi some about this, and when you look at our country's history, we both, of course, were turned loose at some level from the mothership of England and in different ways and at different time periods, but both were nations that were nobody in the global elite community thought would survive at any period of time, for any lengthy period of time at all. They just didn't give us good odds, either India or the United States of America. And we've defied that, and I think we've defied that because of some very common values, the work ethic, the sense of individual freedom and personal liberty, a sense of duty to the greater good and your neighbors, your greater community, and the omnipotent and the greater world collaborative. And at the underlying it all to me is the commonality is the sense of a peaceful faith and a peaceful people. The United States, India's peaceful history, and that's never been questioned. The United States is a country that, relative to our military might and dominance, we've never seen a country in history on a relative basis that has had so much military might and used it so sparingly in a nefarious way. Usually they're rogue one-off type situations, never the broad strategy of the country. We just don't have a history of that. Big picture, we're a very, very peaceful nation. And I think that's probably why Indian Americans and Hindu Americans are starting to recognize that the Republican principles and that spirit of responsibility and duty is more natural. And I commend Indian Americans for figuring it out so quickly, because so many other groups of different backgrounds have come here and have sort of defaulted to the Democrat Party for long periods of time, decades on decades, So I'm so pleased to see the awareness and awakening coming so quickly in the Hindu American community. And it's fun to be a part of and talking about it and discussing it with you this evening. Mike Levin, I'll speak very briefly to my opponent. They go to our church. They're decent folks. We're always cordial with each other. They're a nice family, and Mike's a hardworking young man. I can say young man because I'm 57 and he's 42. But at the end of the day, he's a 42-year-old Bernie Sanders. And I don't question what's in his heart, but I know that by policy, he is determined to end any profit or private element of healthcare, which it would be devastating for our country, and have the government run it A to Z, birth to death, with no private market being legal, which is disgraceful. He is very, very determined to continue to demagogue successful people versus people who have not worked as hard. You'll hear them talk a lot about economic injustice, but you'll never hear them talk about disparity in work ethic or determination or upbringing or sense of duty to the greater good and a responsibility to be productive. They're divisive, and they want to create angst and jealousy in folks who, with some exceptions, non-able-bodied and some others, have just not been willing to work as hard or dream as big. And that, to me, is a socialist tendency. He has also shown with his rhetoric to be in favor of open borders, which would be disastrous for our country. And I believe it would, just based on where we're situated geopolitically and the dynamics, I think it would be disastrous for the Indian American community, although we'd have the immediate relief on the caps. But I think that would pale in comparison to the disadvantages. He voted to allow 16-year-olds to vote. And that's where I question where his heart is at. We have a 17-year-old. He's a nice young man, but you don't want him voting. And voting takes some thoughtfulness, some understanding, some smarts, but some wisdom as well. And so that showed me something about Mike. And he seems very, very determined to turn the whole region royal, dark blue. He recently backed a 20-year-old socialist in San Clemente who thought we could do without a police force because the police are oppressive. And this is a city of 70,000 people. And that just tells me who Mike is in terms of political strategy and what he wants to try to get done. So I'm working hard to beat him, to work hard and represent our community in Congress, to set politics aside when the campaign's over, collaborate with the people who want to collaborate for the greater good of our country and our state of California and the communities that underlie the 49th. But I want to play a little defense as well against some of the reckless ideas of the hard progressive left, which I believe collectively have a different vision for our country than many of us share. So with that, questions, whatever's on your mind, it's nice to be with all of you this evening.
Thank you, Mike. So number one, before I get over to I think the voice is good. Can all of you give me this thumbs up? Okay, so my question to you is, first of all, let me explain the constituency CA49, which is from Dana Point to Forest West. So all Indian communities living in that area can contribute to your campaign by either voting for you or campaigning for you. Now that's a constituency. Is there anything I missed out, Brian?
No, the district runs from all the way down to Del Mar, Solana Beach, Forester Ranch, all the way up through Dana Point in Orange County. Correct. And the three biggest populations centers south of Pendleton are Vista, Oceanside, and Carlsbad. And then north of Pendleton, San Clemente is a good-sized city. And all the rest of the communities, whether they be Orange County or San Diego County, are a little more modest in size, 20, 30,000 people cities. The three big cities, Vista, Carlsbad, and Oceanside. And we have a lot of volunteerism in this campaign. We have a lot of people, young people, that are excited to be part of it. We keep talking about changing hearts and minds, and the theme of our campaign, Adi, is educate, educate, educate. Right. If we talk to today's 19-year-old and ask them to explain the appeal of socialism and Bernie Sanders, without being dismissive or being flip about it, most often they don't have more than one or two sentences, and those aren't particularly captivating or well thought out. I think they're really just uneducated as it regards what they want to accomplish in life and what kind of governmental system will facilitate that or make it possible, I should say. All these high school volunteers, when they come in, I spend some time with all of them, and we ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they want to be general managers of football teams, and they want to be Instagram entrepreneurs, and they want to be college professors, and they want to start big companies, big tech companies. They want to dream, they want to be entrepreneurial, they want to delve into education with their own set of goals and purposes. None of them want to work a government-provided green job that AOC, Ilhan Omar, Mike Levin, and others, want to provide to them. That's not what their mindset is. So when you help them understand how that world, that path, that socialist path is not healthy for them or helpful to their dreams, it's amazing how excited they get. And we need your donations, and I'll get to that in a minute. We need your volunteer support. We need the good word in the community, the social media connectivity, and so forth. But I'll tell you, if you do none of that, follow this race online. You'll be excited watching the youthful energy and the tone of the campaign, I think, which we intend to be an inspirational tone. As far as donations, yes, Maryott is Maryott. It's Maryott for Congress. You go on the website, and obviously there's a donate button there. Federal maximums are $5,600. They're $2,800 for each season because we strategically left a little primary debt. You can do the double. And then what I tell everybody is the federal maximum is $5,600. $500 keeps a field director busy all week, changing hearts and minds, working hard, and getting in front of these changing demographics and young people and telling our great story. And then $5 fills the coffee pot for our volunteers. So we'd love to have you on board and part of our team if you're listening, and we'd be sure grateful for the support. I think you will find in Washington, I will recognize the importance of India in the geo-global picture. To me, this is critically important because without question, China, for I believe decades to come, will be the prominent, primary, I should say, antagonist with the United States. They're playing the long game. They're very, very determined. I think we will emerge from this COVID crisis with even more determination and resolve, especially if President Trump is reelected, to making sure we maintain balance in the region and be mindful of the relationship between China and Pakistan, be mindful of the broader picture in the region, some of the influences and some of the conflicts, and how the United States can be a helpful ambassador in that area and be a leader in that area. And I think we'll be also mindful of the fact that as we try to come back from COVID economically, the hard left is going to try to take us down the path of overwhelming debt that can only be answered by government control and socialism. We are going to need to demonstrate quickly, decisively, and in a very visible way that the old model, supercharged, can do wonders to get us back on track quickly. And that's going to mean respecting the need for high-skilled workers and quickly getting resolution between the bills, getting Senate passage of the Fair Immigration for Skilled Workers bill, and also encouraging our president to continue to lead the way there on broader, thoughtful immigration reform. And I recognize that, and I recognize what that's going to mean to American families throughout our country, and I'll work hard for that.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So our working philosophy for Americans for Hindu Super PAC is we are neither left nor right. We are dharmic, or we stand for truth and justice for all Americans, including American Hindus. So, with that in mind, and also there is another principle that we follow, that we want happiness for all in America that we chose. We did not choose a socialist America. We chose a capitalist America, which stands for equal right for an opportunity for all Americans. And we believe in that healthy competition gives rise to equality for all. Because if the big industries and the big companies, they prosper, then every prosperity is for everyone, not just for few people. So with that, I'll stop here and I'll open the forum. And I'll first have our chairman, Dr. Ramesh Japra, ask a question.
All right, thank you very much. I think, as Adi said, we are centrist, and I think you touch upon those points very well. You've covered a lot of issues about immigration, about health issues, especially Medicare for all, which the leftists are doing, and what your position is. And you also touch upon a little bit about the foreign policy, especially post-COVID era, which we think, just like after World War II, there was a new world. I think there's going to be a new world order. And we believe strongly that after President Trump is reelected, and you are back in Congress, and then we have the Congress also Republican, the partnership between our Prime Minister Modi, President Trump, and of course the Congress and the Parliament back home, and from people to people is going to be very, very strong. And we're going to take upon some of the enemies who are socialist, communist, Islamist, and now even the Chinese have joined them. I think we need to plan a strategy very, very well to counter them. And the New World Order, India has already has taken a page from America's self-reliance. What President Trump is saying that America first, India is also saying India first. They're bringing back all the manufacturing, and of course, service is very, very strong back in India. And if this partnership can start in the post-world order between United States of America and India, and where we don't have to rely upon a dictatorship like China, and it can be two democracies partnering, and a lot of these manufacturing can come back to United States of America as well as India, and a lot of these partnerships and relationships are going to grow and help the whole world, not just these two countries. I think that is my belief, and we would request you also to come up with this kind of strategy in post-COVID era, and if you can tell us exactly what you would be doing, not only just in the United States of America, carrying out our narrative, how to help the conservative, the centrist, and people who believe in American dream like us, and the skilled workers, but also in the foreign policy in the post-COVID era, how the United States and India can take the lead and create a new world to make everybody happy.
Thank you, Doctor. So I just want to briefly touch on the bipartisan or the centrist for a minute, and then I want to speak to the partnership between our great countries. In my late 20s, having graduated with a degree in political science, I'd always wanted to work in the field, but I went straight into banking. And as life often happens, life happens while you're busy making plans. So there I was, 30 days removed with my degree in political science in a manager training program in banking. But I took the opportunity a few years later to work in the field as an independent, changed my registration to Democrat to work as chief of staff for a legislator in Mike Dukakis' state house. You may not remember Mike Dukakis, presidential candidate who was very progressive for his time, and I saw the failure of throwing money at everything. But I also saw that mindset and how sometimes it was well-intentioned, it was just naive, and it just didn't tap into the best of man, meant in a broad sense, man, and inspire people. And we have a lot of examples of that right now that continue from progressive policies where we just don't tap in and inspire people. We make them sadly dependent, almost as though we've given up on them. But I do very much have a respect for the system of bipartisanship and the need to work with people and collaborate when the campaign bells stop ringing. So speaking of the partnership between our countries as we emerge from COVID, I mean, I think it was important pre-COVID. Once this, from a purely realpolitik, when you look at this president pressing China, it was natural to try to, to have a natural alliance be strengthened with India. But we're one of few true constitutional democracies. We're well-populated countries. We're largely speaking very smart, cerebral countries with great natural resources. There's so much there to align. I would like to see the countries get something of a trade deal done, even if it's a little bit symbolic. I think it will be helpful. I would like to see a stronger defense posture, a partnership, between the countries. I think we have $2 or $3 billion in military goods exchanging hands. That's a start, but I would like very much to see the partnership grow and a recognition that both countries have a lot at stake in being codependent and having that working synergy as countries that at their core, at their root, are very peaceful people. And this to me is the big differentiator. George Bush Jr. said some years ago that when you put it all aside, and whether it was referencing financial success, professing this religious belief or that, whatnot, at the end of the day, individuals are either good or capable of evil. And the ones capable of evil are the true danger throughout the world. And I think our countries historically have a people that have a foundational respect for peace. And, maybe it is more, Christian, Judeo-Christian value driven in the United States. And, Christ was a peaceful man, certainly, and Hindu value in India and the greater common good and everything, the beauty of those beliefs as well, being so peaceful at the core. We're going to have to start recognizing it, that the battles can be given different names with different ideologies, but at the end of the day, at some level, nations who are benevolent, who give the power to their people and recognize that they're just caretakers of the government, not, know-all leaders, are really the countries that we should want to partner with. And that's what makes India so natural for us. And you see it in the success level of Indian Americans who come here, and the immediate determination to be productive and to be part of this country's great history of productivity and success. And it's so impressive. And to me, it's just very natural for our countries to be aligned. But there's also very stark realpolitik, geopolitical reasons where we have to increase the partnership and particularly the military partnership.
Thank you, Congressman. And
I love your optimism, Adi.
Thank you, Brian. And it's a pleasure to hear that answer from you. Now, one of the things that we have, before I speak, I'm going to give a chance to one of our trustees, Dr. Shobha Chokalingam. So please ask the question.
Good evening, Doctor.
So she's from Chicago, Illinois. She is on our board of directors. As a trustee of the Americans for Hindu Super PAC. So please, Shobhaji, please go ahead.
Unmute her.
Please go ahead. Shobhaji, can you please unmute yourself on your device?
Adi, perhaps we have to unmute her?
No, she's okay. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, now we can hear.
Thank you for recognizing that. But no, it's all good. But Mr. Maryott, very nice and refreshing to listen to your speech, because you're really a candidate in my neck of the woods, because I went to Loma Linda for my fellowship training, and so all of the the area you mentioned is my favorite hangout place during the weekends, the entire stretch of Southern California. You might wonder what I'm doing in the Midwest, but that's how life is sometimes. Shovel a little snow, but
Well, you won't get any grief from me, because Chicago is either my first or second favorite city alongside New York. My mother grew up with 9 brothers and sisters in Gary, Indiana.
Oh, Gary, that's got a lot of fame to itself, huh?
Of course, yes. And we spent some time there as a kid, and through my adult life, I've always enjoyed the city. So you picked a winner.
Yeah, Chicago. It's great.
If you had to leave Southern California, you picked a winner.
There you go. Exactly. That's a good way to put it, right? Just the oceans are missing. But, I really like the way you put the fabric of the people of the 2 great democracies. A lot of folks ask me, how do I feel, living out here? I said, I don't even know the difference between the 2 countries. That's how I feel. Very accepted, very warm. And then it brings out the best in people. Like you said, the peace that you have. That's what brings the best in people, not, being very authoritarian or oppressive. So that's what's America doing. It's making a lot of people bloom to their full potential. Now, in terms of healthcare, if I may, it's definitely, socialism is not the way to go, because we know in UK and Canada, many places it's not working. There are doctors packing up their bags like at 5 p.m. No more. And the wait time for a bypass surgery is 6 months, that the government actually pays for them to be flown to the Philippines or India to get a bypass surgery.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. We know that. And like you say, if there's no incentive, it doesn't bring out the best. I mean, you definitely don't want to produce greedy folks. That's the downside. But majority, good people, they're contented. They produce to the maximum, right? Yeah. So that's a great analogy. But also the India-US relationship, I'm so glad. I think you're very knowledgeable about it. It's not only for both countries' progress, but also for the security of the world. Because of the access, I think we now recognize who the true friends of the country and the world are. And I'm glad that the Trump government, the whole Republican team, is actually taking that under their wings to grow, because the other focus is kind of the security. And all of us Indian Americans, although, we're here for a long time, we're always like rolling our eyeballs with Pakistan. And I'm like, Bernie Sanders' picture was shown on a billboard in Pakistan. I said, what's going on around here? So, we are very outspoken about that. But I'm glad that it's not about any particular just country. It's just their ideology. And I think we really appreciate, the Indian Americans now really appreciate the stand taken by the Republican, all of you in emphasizing. And Trump president has done a lot of goodwill with Modi ji. And I was there at the Howdy Modi event, and I could see the president go all out and wonderful, passionate speech. I think he won over 50,000 Indian Americans in a second. So thank you for that. And I can see how very balanced you are. And we would certainly encourage all the Indian Americans there to definitely vote for you, because no 16-year-old is going to vote, because we were all 16 years of age.
Like I said, he's a nice young man, but you don't want him voting. Yeah.
Oh, no. I'm glad you highlighted that. So thank you,
Doctor. That's who my opponent is. He's dogmatically hard left, and there's an agenda there. Because you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. We all want people to have great health care and have it accessible to them. We all want people to have, economic opportunity. They just have to be willing to work. But when you see things that are so strategic and have no explanation other than trying to acquire power and what I call cheap votes. Cheap votes to me are votes you don't have to earn. You tap into anxiety about the environment, or you tap into anxiety about your youthful exuberance, a 16-year-old thinking they should be allowed to vote. They're cheap votes. It's cheap support. Yeah. And not to be partisan, but the Democrats have been particularly good at it. And when I see that kind of extreme from Mike, I find it distasteful.
In Illinois, you can buy cigarettes before you're 21.
Well, I mean, No, I mean,
So you shouldn't be able to vote before 21.
Oh, sure. I actually, and I don't know how broad our audience is. Somebody will grab a clip of this and have great fun with it. But I'm actually a big believer that 25 or you have served the country and been honorably discharged. To me, those are, work a little bit, pay some taxes, learn a little bit, life is knowledge, but more importantly, it's wisdom. They wanted me to run for office when I was 31, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I've seen too many mistakes made by the 20-something-year-old legislators, and I came back to it late in life. I just did a little different. Nice. You need knowledge, so when I see that kind of foolishness, to me, that's where the left is operating as a full-time campaign, and that's a little bit distasteful. But again, when the bell rings, they're all my friends. They've all accomplished what they had to accomplish to get to Congress, which is no small feat. And I'll treat them with incredible dignity and respect,
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sumanaji, a lot for your wonderful question. Now, I would like the next question to be by, if any other director is online, I think Sobrato ji. Subrataji, please go ahead, Subrataji.
Okay, so thank you so much for this conversation.
So before you start, Subrataji, Sobrato Gangopadhyay is our trustee from Houston.
Another beautiful spot. Evening.
Yeah, so I will deviate a little bit and be a little more provocative than my friends here.
Good.
So because that's the purpose of these conversations, really.
Of course.
So I will say that I'm not a centrist. And I'm not a centrist. I would be a centrist if it were the Democratic Party of FDR and LBJ. And I would be a centrist there. But I believe, and I'm quite convinced that all the parties, including the Republicans, have actually moved left, because there is an extreme leftward shift of the Democratic Party that actually reminds me of the days of the first alliances in modern times between the communists and the Islamists that followed the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. And that's a fascinating historical study. This is not a time to go into it, but I think I see some of the traces of those in current politics. I mean, that alliance happened to bring down the Tsar and the Russian Orthodox Church. But there is no Orthodox Church to bring down today. There is no Tsar to bring down today. But how do you see reflections of that? It's very interesting. For instance, our friends have been debating about the resolutions at Minneapolis, preceded by those at Seattle. And a lot of my friends think this is because people don't know, are actually uninformed about what's happened in India. And the point is that that is not the case. The very fact that such resolutions come from the progressives indicates two things. One, that they do not recognize that India is a representative republic as United States. And 1.4 billion people vote through their representatives, including 220 million Muslims. So when an extreme fringe essentially subverts this principle of democracy in full knowledge by these actions played on the center stage, it tells me that this is an extremist fringe that does not believe in democracy actually. Because if they did, then there is no reason for them to deny the agency of 200 million plus Muslims who speak to their representatives in the parliament. Legislature debates the issues, is signed into law by the government. So one, they do not respect India as a democracy, neither do they respect the foundations of representative republic. So these people, I would not expect to respect the foundations of the representative republic in the United States. There is no reason to. Secondly, they are elected to serve the interests of local people. The very fact that this extremist fringe believes that it can use the power of United States to subvert democracy in a foreign land, I believe the same is increasingly reflected in this man. So both communism and Islamism are transnational philosophies. They are not national philosophies. Historically and currently, they are transnational philosophies. The difference between a liberal is that the liberal still can be a nationalist. But communists and Islamists are not nationalists. These are transnational philosophies. So therein I see the grave danger to the United States. I think India can manage herself. She has managed herself over thousands of years. People have come and gone, and she will manage herself. But I'm increasingly concerned about the United States. And I would like you to give me your comments on how do you see the strategies are to combat a hijack of the entire United States politics by extremist elements.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments and the background to the comments very much. There is an element of the hard left, the progressive wing of the party, that has become, sadly, the cool wing of the party. They, however, you will not see them use the word God in any of their communications. You will see a very distinct reaction to religion, a willingness to be very snide about religion that you never saw that from the Democrat Party. You always saw a reverence at some level for religion. You don't see a respect for personal freedoms. You see this administrative state heavy broad initiative. It's government. We're going through a very interesting time with it here in California right now, as a very relevant example, where this governor has his foot on the throat of business people throughout California, as though only government can make rules or deploy anything effectively. No trust in the people, and this is very dangerous. And this is why the hard progressive wing of the Democrat Party, I believe, wants to do away with the Electoral College, because they don't, they want to simply remove that. And ultimately, the more the masses or the less well-versed masses can caught up in the emotion of what they have to say, the more they can consolidate power. Now, if you had referenced it as being acute danger to the United States 10 years ago, I might have thought it was a little bit of hyperbole. Today, I will tell you, I share that exact concern from the progressives, which, of course, the communists used the term progressive in their ideology many decades ago. I mean, this notion, you're fooling people, it's basically saying it's progress because it's my way, and my way is the best way, and that in and of itself makes it progress, which of course is ridiculous. But ultimately, what's changed in our country over the last 10 years, and I would use the word dangerous now, is the media. So we have lost the broad media and a willingness to hold government accountable and to be transparent and help with the education process. News information is supposed to broadly educate by putting it out there in a form that people can digest in their own way through their own prism of experiences and education, but it's supposed to at least be out there in a fair way. And now we are only getting any kind of redress through the courts in a society that is otherwise pushing hard left, with the media very much in sync with them. So that part of it, I agree with you, is dangerous. And it's an element of the party and the left that is very dogmatic, very righteously dogmatic, and very, very much in sync with some very powerful elements of the media. What the global connection of all that is, and the ultimate, who knows? We can speculate. We can talk about that in longer dialogues. But I would submit to you that people on the left, if they were presented, or the Democrats, let's just say, even non-Republicans, you could say, if they heard 3 or 4 ideas that you might associate with the old right wing, if you will, of the Republican Party, that ultimately that would be unnerving to them. And so the idea that we should sit still and allow them to put it in our kids' heads at the college age and high school age that there's something to be said for socialism, and it's gotten a bum rap. And, you know, there is great economic injustice, and this economy doesn't work for all. I always say, you know, it works for all, for the most part, that are willing to work, you know, is really diabolical, because we're a much greater country than that. And that is mind pollution, and it is upsetting. So there is an element of the left. I would say you could find a lot of it in the Progressive Caucus that Mike is a member of. It's a caucus that is run by Prayala out of Seattle. It is chaired by, it is whipped, so second in command for all intents and purposes is Ilhan Omar. And their ideas are very hard left, very, very socialist. And we can walk through the legislation, but it's definitely not representative of a country that is built on individualism, personal freedom, and government, minimal and limited government. I know we talked mostly about the U.S. there, not India, but you know, but I do share the alarm with that, and I am mindful of that. When we're out door knocking and talking to people in the district, they're not in the weeds on the issues enough to understand. This is a really important point. They're not in the weeds enough on the issues to really understand how disastrous some of these policy ideas, and how determined they are in the political strategy behind them on the left to speak to it. They just want to hear you say that you're going to be an ambassador and you're going to work for, you know, collaboration. And that's the way I feel. But it's that hard left wing. Some people are dismissive about it. They might roll their eyes and say, yeah, AOC is kind of a knucklehead, but boy, doesn't she have a lot of great energy. And, Fidel Castro had a lot of great energy. So.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I have with me the next. I give the podium to ask question to Chris Murthy. He's a chief of staff for Americans for Hindus. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening to all of you. Good evening, Congressman Maryott. I want to say that because you're going to get there anyway. So now, so I'm a 35-year Republican and voted for 8 presidential candidates from the Republican Party. So here's a little secret I don't want Adi to hear. Hang on to Adi, because he's going to get you not only votes from the Hindu community, we are going to get you votes from the mainstream. That's the power of the Americans for Hindus organization. Similarly, our organization's strength is also humbled and grows by not just the Americans of Hindu origin, but people like you who can see the great relationship that United States and India is building up. So now I'll come to the question, kind of tricky, but typical. I mean, I'll pose it to you anyway. Sobrato ji brought one point, and you answered it very eloquently. This is with regards to how the government has been influenced in the past by forces and voices which are influencing governmental decisions federally, which are not necessarily in the best interest of the United States. And I'll go into the intrinsics of it. I've been in the past a kind of an advisor to Brookings Institute and certain think tanks. And you and me know that there are so many think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, the Brookings Institute, Carnegie Mellon, and universities, which are all giving advice to the United States. The challenge we have is many of these universities are funded by strategic lobbyist groups which are influencing their views. So what would you as a congressman bring to the table to make sure that in these think tanks like Brookings Institute, Heritage Foundation, Carnegie Mellon, there is a Hindu voice, or at least fairness to the Hindus who have been one of the strongest democracies in a region which is surrounded by communists, as you know, and dictatorial thing, and that is so important. How would you, as congressman, influence that change to make those think tanks advise what's right for the United States, and to put strong Hindus in the right positions to give advice to the government?
Wonderful question, Chris. And I've seen this a couple of times now, where India has been, where it's been speculated that India has not invested heavily enough in lobbyists. You may have seen that or heard that before. I don't know on a dollar level if that's true or not, but I think as peaceful people in peaceful nations, you want to assume that good governance is unfolding for the right reasons and for the good of people, and we know that's not always the case. So I want to break it into two a little bit, and if I don't cover anything, I'll call me out on it. I'll try to return to it. But there's my approach, I'm going to call it, okay, which I'd like to discuss with you. I'll finish with the think tanks, and then, but I also want to mention the folks with sort of sinister design that are capable of influencing our institutions and our decision making. And I would submit that China was very good at this some decades ago. There was a great rush in the global community to kind of give China a pass because of that massive market opportunity and not hold them accountable to certain steps of responsibility that they should have been required to take before they were welcomed into the broader global business community and gained entry into certain areas. And obviously the security seat, the seat on the Security Council. So I think there's, money's always talked, sadly, but I think social media and all of its ability to push subliminal discussion and headlines and stories and shape things a certain way has just gone 100-fold in the last 20 years in terms of access and ways to plant information and to influence people, and the business of influencing decision makers and those that they're hearing from has become an industry in and of itself well beyond anything it ever was before, because there's so much opportunity and so many ways to do it now with technology. So that's been a little bit game changing. As far as how I conduct myself in DC, I'm not going in as a career politician. I've had my money-making career, and the way I view it now, I'm a concerned businessman, a concerned mayor, a concerned father, and now I want to go do what I can. I'd like to serve 8 or 10 years and make a real difference, but if I speak boldly on some issues and it costs me and I'm a one-termer, so be it, But my goal is to serve chunky years and do some good and make a difference, and then come back home. And that's more the model that I think we need more of. And it doesn't have to be financial services or financial planner. It can be an engineer. It can be an academic. It can be a medical doctor. But people who learn, who live, who gain wisdom, who gain experience, who go through some hardships, and begin to understand that there's consequences to things they vote for, both intended and unintended, because of the wisdom that they've gained. So because I'm not going as a career politician, I believe I can insulate myself from the inappropriate influence of lobbyists and take the good information presented and decode it myself. The broader issue of the prevalence of that and how it can impact think tanks and organizations that have great respect, that influence others and morph their message or morph who they are over time, or distort their message or soften their message or change their message, is something that I'd have to say I'd like to think about some and maybe educate with you on it and collaborate a bit and come up with some concrete ideas. I mean, I think part of it is just asking more of our public servants and expecting more of them, but then how can they impact those third parties and influence them positively as a counterbalance to the more nefarious influence that they're getting. So that's a little bit circular and long-winded, but I'd love to collaborate with you, Chris, some more on it. Maybe get a couple of key examples, in a follow-up, just you and I, if that's possible, and you can give me some things to think about. We're a campaign that's theme is educate, 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 and we're very excited about it. And we're very busy in the field organization doing it and working at it. We want to impact young people and and everyone in terms of keeping our country on the right course. But I'm also very coachable, and I love to keep learning, and so I'd like to collaborate with you a little bit on that as well, because I don't think I have the magic answer on the think tanks part of it at the moment. But I appreciate the question and the challenge of that. I do have a sense of how much damage can be done, Chris, if we don't recognize the jeopardy there in that issue that you summarized.
Great answer, Brian. Now, it can be a question or a statement or anything. One of our biggest concern for American Hindus is the partiality of U.S. aid-sponsored organizations such as United States Council of International Religious Freedom, USCIRF. And that organization has, I know India doesn't get rattled by it. India dismisses it every time. Every time they pass a resolution, India throws it out in the trash bin. So, but you know, the leftist and the ultra-leftist and the Islamic combined, they keep on passing one foolish resolution over the other. So it has made the joke of United States, just like the Minneapolis City Council resolution, Seattle City Council resolution against CAA, which is an act of India to protect persecuted Hindus, Sikhs from Pakistan and Bangladesh and Afghanistan, because their women were being raped, children were being kidnapped, killing was happening. Now the city councils, which are the tremendous ultra-leftist, AOC kind, Ilhan Omar kind of jokers there, now they keep passing on resolution funded by the Council of American Islamic Relations, and and we have to name these organizations because you need to remember that these are the new cartoon characters of American politics. Mm-hmm. So we have to find a way where the U.S. Congress doesn't become a joke in the world size, especially India. As India is growing, it's the third largest economic power, and more intelligent people, they have deep respect for America because the United States stood by them in many times when they had a crisis. So, and with Donald Trump and Narendra Modi building on that relationship, how do we stop this, I would say, light-hearted banter in city councils?
Boy, that's a great question, because it's going on all over. I resist it in our council. I won't have anything to do with it. I speak against it. And by the way, it doesn't have to be an issue about India. Anything that we have no business voting on in council, I say, look, guys, we've got no business voting on that. Nobody's asking us to send a message on this or send a message on that. So there's a distinct difference between being public servant and being an elected official who fancies oneself a political celebrity. And there's two things those council members across the country are bound up in. They're bound up in the notion of a career in politics, and I think you probably see some of the most obnoxious behavior and foolishness coming from younger council members. You'll see plenty from older as well, but they want to make a name for themselves. They want to be part of a greater government-driven narrative that they think is the only way, whatever that may be. And we know in Minnesota the obvious, but it varies from state to state and region to region. They're not public servants. They've grabbed hold of an elected position for the wrong reasons, and they're not leaders. Leadership means zero in, be a problem solver, and be thoughtful and get the work done. I have said before, I have no intention of going to DC to be a political celebrity. I'm not worried about how many Twitter followers I have in the end and all this kind of thing. I just want to go be a thoughtful leader. That's what we've done in the city. We had 4 or 5 critical needs, critical situations. I was a quiet leader on them. I took the temperature down, helped take the temperature down, and we got the work done. So structurally, there's nothing you can do. Those referendums and those resolutions and all that nonsense. We probably can't ever take a council or any legislative bodies take away their ability to put that stuff forward. But here's what we can do as thoughtful, peaceful Americans that want to see progress in our country, we can recognize, Adi, that politics matters. And people get so busy in their lives and so busy in all the things that they have going on, and they assume good leadership, and they assume that elected officials are coming from a place of common sense and experience. And so often they are not. It's like this 20-year-old that Mike got behind in San Clemente. He wanted to do a bunch of resolutions that are anti-policing, pro-criminal, pro-economic justice, and all the rest. I mean, he's a socialist in his parents' basement for the most part. And so we can't assume good leadership. Democracy is obviously a wonderful platform for both our countries of origin, so to speak. And but it asks a lot of people. And we just have to recognize that, and we have to be more determined about it, and hope that more people recognize it as part of their civic duty to become informed, to get a sense of who people really are that we're electing to all levels of government. Because I've always said there's two things that you should look at and evaluate with a politician. First of all, no matter whether they're voting on the issues at that level or not, recognize that they could take that elected position and use it as a springboard to higher office, where they would be voting on things that are broader based and and matter more, and find out where they stand on some issues that may be a level or two above the elected position they're running for. But secondly, try to get a sense of what elected leaders at any level would do if they were king for the day. And, if they could wave a wand, what is it they would do? If they could wave a wand at any level of government, what would they try to accomplish? What do they think is a good idea if they were king for the day? You can never ask them because they'll answer dishonestly. But if you watch and get a feel for what they're passionate about, then you realize that that's somebody dangerous if they were to progress in the political field. And it's tough. It's a big ask. There's no magic bullet. We'll never be able to take that ability away from them. And sadly, on some of the more anti-Hindu, anti-Christian, anti-democracy in the way we've constructed it, representative democracy, the media, the established media, is getting pretty fired up to help a lot of them. And that's tricky. And we just have to keep plugging away every day. It's a lot of blocking and tackling. And we just have to keep educating people on how important it is to do it. But boy, is it frustrating to see that kind of stuff pass. And then some of it turns into rulemaking. First they start with a fanciful notion and a resolution, and the next thing you know, they're passing some ordinance, and you can't do this in public or do that in public. And, then there's a bunch of that kind of thing that always goes on in Berkeley. But tough one. But I'm glad you brought it up. It's an important issue because it all ties together as part of the big picture challenge.
I got your message. We have to just learn to ignore them and tolerate them.
Well, I mean, but educate people so ultimately they don't progress to a higher level of office, and that can be, because they do brand damage at the municipal government level, but they can do real damage if they get to Sacramento or DC. Speaking of California.
So I'll give the next forum to our media coordinator, Shelja Singh. She's from Bay Area.
Hi, Mr. Maryott. Thank you so much for giving time to us. And we are glad that you talked to us, and I came to know a lot of things. To give a little about my perspective, well, I'm very new to activism. I used to read newspapers, had views, but I really was not active in politics at all. But I think Bernie Sanders was the last straw. It really, really scared the wits out of me. And I said that all of us have to do something. And just as you were talking about a lot of misinformation being out there, and that we should be educating people. My question, and I'll keep it short, is actually two-pronged. First thing is that, and that is for asking Republican Party as such. First thing is that most of the media that we see here, or anywhere in the world, in fact, even in India, is more aligned with the left. So, what does Republican Party as such think about getting the balanced news out there? Because our experience has been that there are in many ways media is not telling the truth. They lie blatantly. So the point is that how to bring out the balanced information, and does Republican Party ever think that they actually do lose out? Because, for example, the way President Trump is made out in media is not actually the complete truth. A lot of times, the way they word the messages and the news makes him look like a big monster, which is not always the case. And the second thing is that ever since I started being an activist, just a few months of that, I belong to Bay Area, and that is the den of Democrats. So Republicans have totally lost out in California, and whatever little history I know that they lost it quite some time back, and I have not been able to regain it. So, do you or the party as such have any ideas how, on grassroots levels and otherwise, how you can win the trust back of people? Because right now, people that a lot of them I have talked to are really, really hardcore Democrats. They don't even want to hear anything from the other side. They get pretty upset about it. So we need to change the perspective, make people think a little more, or maybe a little long term. But has Republican Party really thought about it? That why have they lost out so much, and what should they do to make it better for Republicans here?
Thank you, Sumati. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the question. So I have been saying for some time, Sheza, that as Republicans, we continue to hang our failure hat on changing demographics. Well, the demographics are changing in that county, so we're not going to be able to win that seat anymore, or this seat anymore. And that's a cop-out. Then there's been a temptation to chase after those changing demographics and try to modify our party. And I think Governor Schwarzenegger was a little bit guilty of that. And there's a better way, and which I think is recognized that demographics are always changing. And just the broader dynamics are always changing. Our principles are tried and true. They have collectively, formed a foundation that has allowed us to create the greatest success story in human history, bar none. I mean, that's really what the U.S. I mean, we had a fresh slate to work with, right? This mass acreage that was undeveloped, if you will, and unpopulated, and so we had a canvas to paint on. But what our founding fathers did was create something truly exceptional with an economic system and a governmental system, and then sort of the inspiration of Judeo-Christian values, however, not an official religion, just that inspiration, it's remarkable. But I think the farther schools get away from teaching that, and the farther away that professors on campuses get away from believing in that, the more they're able to influence people. I mean, and that's difficult. So that's a battle there. And then there's a battle in the media, because the media is about, the easily accessible media is about 75%, very, very predominantly left, very, very willing to let their bias influence how they present a story. And then, of course, you have 15% that's just really biased. I mean, they're more political entertainment than they are news. This is one area where I think the internet's been helpful, because we've been able to see publications come along, brilliant young conservatives that are, that speak so eloquently about our values. Epic Times, of people who escaped China, in the throes of communism, that have built an amazing newspaper that, to date, my sense is has been very fair in presentation of the news. We have more coming up along. I originally thought when Adi said you were from the area, I thought maybe San Diego area, because San Diego News Desk is a Republican media outlet, and yet it's fairly balanced, but obviously doesn't have the it doesn't have the reputation as being balanced because it's, after all, sponsored by the Republican Party. The Bay Area is, I mean, that's a real challenge. I think in California, it has to come with incremental wins. Okay, so we have to climb out of the super minority status in the Assembly and State Senate, and that's winning a couple seats, a net gain of a couple of seats in both those houses. Okay, the Assembly and the State Senate. Then we're no longer super minority, and Gavin Newsom can't just keep pushing this nonsense out there that crushes business, crushes entrepreneurs, and continues to push that hard left dogmatic message ideologically as well. So that's one modest win. Winning back some congressional seats is critically important because we contribute to the national party, and hopefully Speaker McCarthy goes in the seat versus Speaker Pelosi, and the president can partner with somebody, and we're not looking at an impeachment situation. If you haven't noticed, Adam Schiff has laid the groundwork for an insurance plan to try to impeach the president should he be reelected, with February committee hearings about the COVID crisis. So that's the national picture that we can contribute to. But these seats in California, if we can win a few of those, we pick up a few bully pulpits. A congressional seat locally is a very strong bully pulpit. You can influence elected potential leaders and those who might want to run for office. You can sort of coach them up and help them come along. You can help with fundraising for other Republicans. So our congressional seats are very important. Mike Garcia won a big race north of Los Angeles for the open seat a week ago. That was a very important win. That was a 5% Democrat advantage seat. We're going to win ours. We're going to have more wins in Orange County. So it has to be incremental. But I want to quickly give you a seed of hope there, Shazan, and I hope I'm saying your name right. But when I worked in Massachusetts in the State House, it was a blue state. It was Kennedy, Massachusetts. And people used to say there would never be another Republican governor in Massachusetts ever in the state, because we hadn't had one since the 1950s. But lo and behold, Mike Dukakis ran for president. He presented a Massachusetts miracle to build his race on. Once he lost to Bush, the cat was out of the bag. There was no Massachusetts miracle, just a leveraged balance sheet and bankruptcy unless we went up dramatically with the state income tax rate. So what happened? We did. We went up 20% with the state income tax rate. People hit a tipping point. And Massachusetts since then has seen almost nothing but Republican governors. Now, why the governor's seat is so important is they can veto, they can set the tone, they have power with who they appoint in these very powerful agencies that impact education and commerce and the environment, etc. So the governor's seat, I believe, will be won in 3 years. I really believe that. I believe California will have a Republican governor in 3 years. We won't win a majority in the Assembly or State Senate, maybe ever again, I don't know. And it'll, we'll incrementally move local politics in the congressional seats. But I actually believe we're going to win the governor's seat in California in 3 years. And I've seen it done in a state where people hit a tipping point. And I think people will hit a tipping point here in California because a lot of people feel they can't build and grow their business here. They may not be able to have their kids living nearby when they grow up because they won't be able to afford homes, and that it's just too government oppressive to stay here for the long term.
Thank you, Brian. My quick vote of thanks to you. Thank you for spending 1 hour. And also, we Americans for Hindus, we have already supported you. And as the president of the Super PAC, I value your time and thank you for coming on here. The last, I would like to invite our chairman to give a vote of thanks to you.
Thank you so much. Got it. Thank you, Adi. First of all, thank you for putting this thing together, and Shaljaji and Sumnaji coordinating this, and of course our Chief of Staff, Chris Murthy. Wonderful. My fellow trustees, of course, but also ideas and become a think tank for us, both Shobhaji, Sobrato, Sharad Mohanji, and Raj Gyaniji. So all my trustees, I want to thank them as well. And we, by the way, we have endorsed you, as a congressional candidate, and not only We'll help with the funds, but we'll also help with the vote banks and get word out there in your region as well as rest of the country, so that those people can also give the funds to your campaign. And we also funded a few other congressmen. A couple of them are from California, and Ritesh Tandon is, by the way, also on the call. I want to give a shout out to a congressional candidate against Ro Khanna from California, Region 17, right here in Silicon Valley, where he's become also progressive, like you mentioned, Pramila Jayapal's name and Ilhan Omar and all those other big names, AOC. So he's one of those, I don't know, what are you going to call them, musketeers or whatever they are. So they the quads, you know, and he's the other person who had gone with Imran Khan and everything. So we are definitely working against him and to bring the Republican candidate Ritesh Tandon here. And Nisha Sharma is in 11, California 11. We also have Manga Ananthamula all the way from Virginia, 11.
Up late.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Manga Ananthamula is from all the way from Virginia 11. She's also on the talk. Give a shout out to her also. Great candidate. I think she's gonna make it also. So we want to make sure that, like you said, our House minority leader Kevin McCarthy becomes the speaker, not Nancy Pelosi. We definitely don't want her.
17 feet.
That's right. So those are our wishes, and we're going to work very, very hard. And we're going to request all my fellows here to work very hard also. Once again, really, really appreciate your time, and especially the way you came out very, very openly with all these issues without any worry if somebody want to use some of these here and there. I mean, you're a fearless fellow out there, and that's what we love about you. And from my heart, as a cardiologist, I want to wish you all the best, and we will work with you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you.
And thank you. Any other board of directors, Sharad Mohan, if you have joined, you have the forum right now. If you're still joined, Sharad Mohan.
Maybe otherwise have Ritesh and Manga there. Or here we can say a word.
So thank you, Congressman, for coming on the show, in the town hall with us, all of us. And we'll work with you on the ground as well as through other areas. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. We'll have some fun. And I saw some questions come across, and I'm very, my personal email is just my name at mac.com, just Brian Maryott at mac.com, and send them afterwards. I'm glad to field them or develop a one-on-one dialogue with somebody. If there was anybody unsatisfied tonight with the inability to get their question asked or answered. And we desperately need help with that third leg of the stool. We have the candidate and a wonderful staff. We have volunteers and activists, that second leg, and we need that donor base in the third leg of the stool. So it's just Maryott for Congress if you want to go online. And I promise you just one thing, that's no campaign or candidate or combination of thereof will put more work behind any dollar you bring into our campaign. We're so grateful for whatever you can do. And we look forward to teaming with you and partnering with you. And I'm honored to be on with you tonight.
Thank you. Good night, Congressman.
Good night.